Welcome to the Old Glory Games podcast. My name is Kyle, and on behalf of Greg, we will get into this episode, which happens to be episode 19. We filmed these episodes roughly 4 to 5 weeks prior to, and every now and then, some current event happens that we didn't really anticipate, like the Olympics opening ceremonies, which we'll probably get to at some point in the future. But also, Willie Mays passed away on June 18th. We recorded this episode roughly 11 days later. This guy was probably you can argue personally between him and Babe Ruth in terms of the greatest player of all time. You can make arguments either way. I think it comes down to really those two players, maybe a tie Cobb. But the point is, this episode is dedicated to him, his legacy, and how he carried himself on and off the field, and the contrast to what we see today with the modern athlete is pretty stunning. Stick around to the end. I'm going to give you a tidbit or another thing that you can check out about Willie Mays. I don't want to spoil it. Check it out at the end, and I will give you that as well. So with that being said, please enjoy this episode.
So hello and good evening. When I was a kid, I really didn't start watching baseball until I was about 6 years old, maybe. So Willie Mays retired in 1973. So I did not get a chance to watch him on TV during his active playing career. But even as a little kid, getting ready to play Little League baseball and really get into baseball as a fan and as a player, I just heard so much about Willie Mays, and it was just amazing how his peers would talk about him and the baseball media would talk about him and how fans would talk about him. And even at that young age, I was aware that he was one of the greatest, if not the greatest baseball player of all time. His numbers speak for themselves, and just the highlights that they would show of him when I was a kid and even today spoke volumes as far as how great of a player he was. And I know we'll get into some of his numbers in a minute, but I think as far as Willie Mays, the baseball player, is concerned, he played with such a youthful enthusiasm. It was just fun to watch him. And again, I wish I had a chance to watch him during his playing career, and I was just a little bit too young to catch him at that time. But from what I hear and from what I see of the videos and whatnot of him, he was just a phenomenal and amazing player. Of course, his nickname was the Say Hey Kid, and I always wondered why they called him that. He earned that nickname as a rookie because he would often say who, say what, say where, say hey. And he was also quoted as saying, they throw the ball, I hit it. They hit the ball, I catch it. He was such a student of the game, and he just loved the game so much, and you could tell by the way he played the game. So when you watch somebody like that, it's just a pure joy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the player I'm about to mention is within the same stratosphere as Willie Mays, but as far as the enthusiasm and the flair, I think I would compare somebody like Bryce Harper as far as that part of the game. Bryce Harper certainly has great talent. He has a great enthusiasm for the game. So if I had to think of a modern player, I would throw Bryce Harper's name in there, but I certainly would not even slightly suggest that Bryce Harper is as good a player as Willie Mays was. And like I said, I know we'll get into his numbers here in a minute, but just one of the numbers, of course, that jumps out for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, he hit 660 home runs. Now, I don't think that will ever be matched. Now, I know that the record books consider Barry Bonds as the home run king as far as all-time home runs. I still consider Hank Aaron the home run king. That's just me. But for the longest time, I think Willie Mays was second, only behind Babe Ruth as far as all-time home runs. And of course, Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's all-time record after that. But that's just one of many incredible stats for Willie Mays. And not only was he renowned for his actions on the field, he was also renowned for what he did off the field. In 1971, he won what was later known as the Roberto Clemente Award. I think it was called at that time either the Commission or the Commissioner Award. I think it was an award. It's a prestigious honor. Yeah, it was the Commissioner's Award. And it was given to the player that represents baseball through character and all-field contributions. And it was later changed to the Roberto Clemente Award, and for good reasons, if anybody knows that story about how he lost his life, in the process of helping others. So I know you've probably got some statistics associated with Willie Mays. Did you want to run through those, or did you want me to run through them?
Well, I'll just go over the highlights. I'm sure you got a lot here. And I'm just going to give it to you in the perspective of who he was as a player and the kind of prototype of, is that right? That's the word I'm looking for. I can't think of it. Prototypical. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. He was certainly a transcendent talent. Yeah. And I saw a clip of him. He was sitting in the dugout and he had his shirt off. And I know guys today are, a lot of them are pumped up and ripped. I mean, he really wasn't. He was muscle, but he was very lean.
Yeah. So, but he had that leanness really allowed him to do a lot of different things, because you're not going to see Babe Ruth steal a lot of bases, right? So his frame allowed him to do a lot of stuff. And that's why I want to say his versatility is very much a prototypical kind of player, where his batting average was above 300, which is hard to do when you play at the length of a career as he did. And he had two sort of careers, because he actually served in the military and came back in the second half of that. He had another Hall of Fame career. So the guy was phenomenal. He had 1,909 runs batted in, 339 stolen bases, and like you said, 660 home runs. And so I'm just going to put here on the screen all of his accolades. You can kind of go through this too if you like. Yeah, the Roberto Clemente Award, 1971, 12 Gold Gloves, and 2 National League MVPs. And he also got 24 All-Star games. I believe, Greg, every single year was he an All-Star game? Is that right? Or
that sounds right, because I think he played for 23 seasons and he got voted in as an All-Star 24 times. I don't know how that math works out, but I'm not going to try to question it at this point. Long story short,
he sat out a season, I believe, because he was actually working with the military for the war.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that makes sense. His team won the World Series in 1954. He was NL Rookie of the Year. He won the batting title in 54. He was the NL home run leader 4 times, stolen base leader 4 times. He hit 4 home runs in a game. He, I don't know that we've mentioned this to this point, but he played, I think, 2 seasons in the Negro Leagues for the Birmingham Black Barons, and until the New York Giants signed him after he graduated from high school, I believe either 1950 or 1951. And as we mentioned, his playing in the Negro Leagues, it's pretty relevant and pertinent considering the major leagues just played a game at the home stadium of the Black Barons on, I believe, June 20th, which was a couple of days after Willie Mays' unfortunate passing. And the minor leagues actually played a game there the same day he passed away. So,
is that Rick Wood Field?
Rick Wood, yeah. Yeah.
I got it on the screen right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they played a game there. So that was timely for sure. And some other stats that are just impressive and mind-boggling. He was the only player to hit 50 home runs and 20 triples in one season. He was, I mean, really, he was an MVP contender in 13 years of his career. Yeah. Let's see. He recorded at least 70 extra base hits for 13 years straight. No player since Mays has been able to accomplish that feat. We talked about the 4 home runs in a game. I'm not sure if I mentioned his iconic catch in the 54.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. I have a special segment for that, but you can talk about it now if you like.
It deserves it. No, we can wait until that. It deserves its own separate mention. So yeah, we can wait until then. So another impressive feat he achieved. Mays is only one of 2 players to have multiple seasons of at least a .320 batting average, 25 homers, and 30 stolen bases. The only other player to ever reach those levels of production is Mike Trout, and I believe he plays for the Los Angeles Angels. Oh yeah, and he's one of just 4 players to accomplish this milestone, hitting at least 20 doubles, 20 triples, 20 home runs, and stealing 20 bases in a single season. And only other 3 players accomplished that. Go ahead.
Can I jump in real quick on that?
Yeah.
There's something called the cycle, and I'm sure he didn't do that every single game. It was just only average, but the cycle is when you hit a single, double, a triple, and a home run in the same game.
Yeah.
It's rare, but it's not as rare as unassisted triple, or it's not as rare as, let's say, a perfect game, but it's pretty rare. And I wonder how rare that is, because it also included stolen bases too, right?
I think the cycle just includes the single, double, triple, and home run. Yeah, that's the cycle in the same game.
But he averaged a cycle plus sort of, and I don't know how you would figure the math out of that over the course of a season, but you know what I'm saying.
I understand. Oh yeah,
each plus stolen bases, yeah.
But yeah, that particular stat is amazing. And in 1956 and 57, in those years, he hit at least 35 home runs and stole at least 35 bases, and only 3 other players reached that milestone since then. So that's just a handful of achievements that Willie Mays attained in his career. And like I said, it's so riveting to hear people that were his peers, that are baseball historians, that were baseball writers at the time, fans of that era, it's riveting to hear them talk about Willie Mays because, like I said, even as a little kid, hearing people talk about him, I'm thinking, wow, he's got to be one of the greatest, up there with Babe Ruth. I know you and I communicated before the show about, okay, are they 1A, 1B? I'm fine with that. I think they're right up there, in my opinion, as far as, the greatest baseball players of all time, but not having a chance to actually see him play, but hear all of those things about him, I felt like I had watched him play in a sense because there was so much talk about how great Willie Mays was in his career. So I've got an interesting trivia fact before we get into the catch and some of these other things we're going to talk about. So 3 of the all-time greats, and I would include Hank Aaron in that conversation. So Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, all 3 of those players started and ended their major league careers in the same city, but with different teams. So Babe Ruth started his career with the Boston Red Sox, ended his career with the Boston Braves. Willie Mays started his career with the New York Giants and ended his career with the New York Mets. And Hank Aaron started his career with the Milwaukee Braves and ended his career with the Milwaukee Brewers. So out of those 3 players, of course, I was nowhere near born when Babe Ruth played, but as I mentioned, I didn't get a chance to see Willie Mays play, but towards the tail end of Hank Aaron's career, I actually saw him play, I think, a couple of times on TV when he was with the Milwaukee Brewers. He was well past his prime, but hey, he was still Hank Aaron, and it was a treat to see him even then with the Milwaukee Brewers. So at least I got a chance to see him play a time or two, but that's an interesting fact that I found to be, pretty interesting as far as those 3 players are concerned. So what have you got as far as, the catch and some of these other amazing things about Willie Mays that we haven't talked about yet?
I got a ton of stuff about Willie Mays related to his patriotism, faith in character, mentorship, legacy, reaction to his passing. So a ton of stuff. But I think we'll be remiss to not talk about the catch now because that's such an iconic moment. And I got a picture of it here on the screen. And a lot of us can be really jaded when we see this catch because, I've seen that all the time. I've seen A-Rod do that. I've seen King Griffey do that. I've seen blah, 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 blah. And we've seen people who are, as you would probably admit, Greg, probably more athletic than Willie Mays today because they're conditioning when they're like 5, you know what I mean? But I saw a video on this particular catch. It was the analytics of the catch. And they showed where he was. He was playing fairly shallow. Is that right? Shallow? Yeah. And this is the World Series. I'll let you we can set up the whole thing, Greg, but I'll let you do the backward drop to it. But the actual catch itself, where he was shallow and the ball was coming hot. It wasn't a high arching ball. It was coming at like a 45-degree angle, hot, right through the fence, okay? And so long and short of it is this. If Willie Mays if he had missed the step by like point something seconds, he'd have missed the ball. He had to react to it, run at a high velocity, and track it over his shoulder. And if you watch the catch, he didn't pull his glove up until the ball was right there. It was like he had it up the entire time. He was running to maintain speed, and then as the ball was coming, his hand went up. It's a remarkable catch, and we don't give it justice because we've seen what we think are more spectacular catches, but in the light of the context of the situation, game part of a World Series, a hot line drive, an important part of the game, and a catch we've probably never seen up to that point, ever, was, now, I will say this, in the Negro Leagues, that was probably every single day, right? That's what they did in the Negro Leagues. They did those kind of theatrical type stuff. But white America hadn't seen anything like that in that kind of setting, I would dare say ever.
Okay.
So, Greg, do you want to give me your impression of that catch and what your thoughts of the impact of it are even today?
Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to add a couple things at least.
Okay.
So today, and I know you said, we've seen that catch since then. And so Willie Mays' catch probably doesn't get the justice it deserves. But think about this. In today's baseball stadiums, dead center is like just a shade over 400 feet. Back then, dead center, a lot of parks are like, 430, 440 feet. So he had even farther to run to get that than a player would today if they started at the same start point. Another thing is the pressure of the moment. He did that in the World Series back when the World Series was a big deal. I'm not saying the World Series isn't a big deal now, but baseball back then was the number one sport in America along with boxing. So a lot of people were paying attention at that point in time. And you've got other variables. It was a day game and the sun and all of these things. So that was not an easy catch. But guess what? He made it look easy. And that was part of his greatness as a player. So Willie Mays was certainly, if you want to proclaim him as the all-time great, I would say he was at least the greatest five-tool player of all time. And the five tools are hitting for average, hitting for power, base running, and speed, throwing, and fielding. And he did all those things very, very well. So I see, 421. Okay, so I'm seeing you go through.
I can't play the whole thing without copyright. I'm trying to kind of skip through it.
So at that last frame where it said 421 feet, I think just about every major league park, except for maybe one or two, have shorter fences than that. Dead center in a lot of these parks today are like, 400 feet, 401, maybe 405 or 410. Certainly, you're not going to see many parks, or hardly any, with fences further away than that. So you would have to take that into account. And also, jumping back to his 660 home runs, he was hitting those home runs in some pretty big and cavernous ballparks. So imagine if Willie Mays hit those home runs today, he'd have way more than 660 because, like I said, the fences are a lot shorter today. So he hit all those home runs in an era where a lot of these ballparks were huge and dead center was a lot further away than it is now. But no, the catch.
Hey, Greg, do you see that?
Yeah.
That's what shocked me. He ran 90 feet, dude. He was so shallow. And then they say something, he had something called optical acceleration cancellation, some scientific term for hand-eye coordination over the shoulder. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So I'm going to put a link to this video in this podcast on YouTube. You guys check this guy out. Sorry, Greg, go on. I'm getting excited.
Oh, no. And it's certainly something to get excited about. But that is, certainly appropriate when you're talking about Willie Mays because he played with a sense of excitement and enthusiasm. So you can't help but share that same excitement and enthusiasm when you watch clips from him playing. So to go back to the game we was talking about that Major League Baseball had at Rickwood Field, and I think during the pregame show, they were talking to Reggie Jackson, another legendary player. He was talking about I think Alex Rodriguez was asking him how he felt about coming back to that stadium. And you'll have to look at this clip. I don't know if I've sent it to you or not, but if I haven't, I will.
Okay.
The demeanor, his demeanor and the expression on Reggie Jackson's face was just so...
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. And he's like, he had mixed feelings, to say the least, about coming back there because of all of the prejudice and racism he faced, because he played for the A's minor league team in Birmingham at that time. And he sang glowing praises about Willie Mays and how he wanted to be just like Willie Mays and wear his uniform like Willie Mays and play the game the right way like Willie Mays and love the game like Willie Mays. And then, of course, he went on to talk about all of the challenges and difficulties he had to face when he played in Birmingham, not being able to go to certain hotels, not being refused to be served at restaurants, being called the N-word and being sent out of establishments, how his white teammates and his white owner jumped in and defended him. The owner basically said, well, if he doesn't eat here, we don't eat here. If he can't stay here, we won't stay here. And how he stayed at one of his teammates' apartments for months on end. And he had to leave because people were threatening to, I think, bomb the apartment complex because he was there. And it was just a riveting and stunning account. You could tell that the people at the desk at that point in time were stunned. It was just like an eerie silence when he was talking. And you could tell they were shocked that that was going on at that point in time and that Reggie Jackson had to deal with that. And he said, I would not wish that on anybody. You could tell it shook him up being back there and recounting those memories of that. But by the same token, the tone of his voice when he was talking about Willie Mays and just he couldn't say enough about how great of a player he was, and he got his start there in Birmingham. So I know it was bittersweet for him, and that is one of the, I guess, downsides of the Negro Leagues, the racism and the hatred that those guys had to deal with. But the one thing that really caught my attention about what he said regarding Willie Mays is how all of those challenges and all of those barriers that he had to face, he didn't complain. He put his head down and he played the game that he loved to the best of his ability. And I think that says a lot about Willie Mays, the man.
Yeah, I had that interview here on the screen here. So you guys, did I drop off there?
Yeah, for a little bit. I hear you loud and clear now.
Okay. What part did you hear from me? Last part.
When you started talking about the link being available to folks that are checking this out on YouTube, and then after that, you started breaking up.
Okay, I'll start over. So I have that link there on the screen there, and so check that video out on YouTube. It's basically just go there and say Reggie Jackson, Rick Woodfield, Willie Mays, and that interview should come up. It's fantastic.
It absolutely is, and I would recommend everybody to listen to it, not only from a baseball perspective, but from an American history perspective, to get a glimpse of what it was like for a Black man to be an athlete or a citizen in general in the South at that point in the, I guess, mid to late 60s, because I think Reggie played for the Birmingham minor league team for the A's. I think like in maybe 1967 might have been his last year with them. So it was certainly a turbulent time back then. But again, to Reggie's point, Willie Mays did not allow that to dampen his spirits, certainly not on the field, and it certainly did not deter him from doing great things off the field as well.
Yeah, and let's segue into that. And also, I'm going to contrast with today's players. I'm sure when I finish saying this, you will already get the connection that I'm trying to make. So, in terms of his patriotism, this is Willie Mays. And you hear Ted Williams and other players who did things for their service to this country. But when a black man does it for a country that allegedly, I don't agree with this, but some people today say, well, we can't ignore racism. It does exist, but there is a situation where people say that America is a bad country and it was formed to keep people down. That's not true. It has some bad things about it, but the good parts about it overweighed the bad parts because it allowed us to overcome those particular barriers. And so for a person like Willie Mays to, good and well, Willie Mays suffered those same types of racial attacks, stereotypes, everything, death threats probably. But yet, what did he do? He served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War, sacrificing part of his baseball career. And the highlight of his sense of duty and patriotism, which also aligns with conservative values, because that's something that us conservatives, we see that we value not necessarily the country in terms of its warts and its ugly side, but we look at it from its framework that it was created to allow people to be individuals who have rights that are not able to be taken from them because they're given to us by God. And that sort of framework is what allowed us to be great. And I think people who saw that to say that this is worth fighting for and worth dying for. And Willie Mays, I'm not sure what his role was in the Korean War, but that was a very, very bloody war. I'm not sure if you know much about that war, Greg, but the Korean War was nasty. It was cold and nasty, and it was ridiculous. It was, you want to talk about that before I move on to his faith?
Sure. So I know you mentioned Ted Williams, and I believe he he took a break from his baseball career, right, to go serve in the military, and then he came back to
I believe so.
Play for the Red Sox. So
yeah, I'll verify that, but I believe
so. To me, any athlete that does that, especially a black athlete, so apparently Willie Mays did that. I believe Joe Louis did it as well. So when you have an athlete do that, especially a black athlete that was facing real racism, not what's being tossed around as racism today, to me that speaks to their character and the love for their country. And that's very commendable considering what was going on at that time. So as athletes, they could have potentially taken the attitude of, well, hey, I'm a star athlete. Why should I go over there and serve in the Army? I'm too important. No, they did their duty and they went over there and they served. So if players like that can honor our country with all of what they were dealing with, why can't our present day athletes hold the same respect and reverence for the flag in our country? Yes, our country, we're certainly not perfect, and we've certainly had a turbulent past, but quite frankly, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else, and I think a lot of people feel that way. So again, for athletes like Willie Mays and Joe Louis and Ted Williams to serve their country in the middle of a very successful athletic careers is really commendable. And again, that speaks to the depth of Willie Mays' character as a man and as a human being.
Yes, for those on the podcast, you didn't see that I had a picture of Ted Williams being sworn in by the U.S. Navy Reserve in 1942. He served in World War II and the Korean War as a naval aviator. But to your point, Greg, if you're black and back then and serving, to me, that's like, extra special, considering what we see today. And yeah, the thing is, I see this country as labor pains. A woman goes through trials, she has a baby, and through that process, there's pain. But at the end, you have a beautiful child to love. And that's essentially what this country has become, in my opinion, is that, the founding fathers knew early on that slavery was going to be a problem. And I hate people who say that it was racist white men with property and power trying to put the thumb on the scale of justice. That's far from the truth. If you look at the actual documents of the Constitutional Convention, even going back to the Declaration, both constitutional congresses, slavery was a huge topic, and most of it was very despicable in terms of the founding fathers' view on it. There were some financial things which prevented like Virginia and South Carolina from signing on because it would have meant they're going to be broke. So there's some of that. But at the end of the day, they knew it was wrong, but they kicked the can down the road to, of course, the Civil War. And so where you have 250,000 white people die for blacks to be free, Juneteenth just happened. And that was the celebration of a Granger, I believe, a Union general, goes in there to Texas and says, okay, you're free now. By the way, your masters didn't tell you this, but you're free. And so that whole process is just us just making sure that justice can be done. And it takes time and sacrifices for that to happen. But the premise is that those laws and those frameworks of this country are in place. We just have to act on it and fight for it to keep it. And so that's what I think Willie Mays has done and Reggie Jackson has done, and anyone else who's suffered this time and walked into the ball field without attitude, got up every morning, put on their uniform without complaining, without saying, oh man, white man done this to me today. I gotta go play this. Look at Jackie Robinson, for goodness sakes. All those guys laid down the framework for what we have now. And I think, quite frankly, Greg, getting off the topic here a little bit, some of these people here, I'm not gonna get too political here, but some people, and you know what I'm talking about, just three letters I'm thinking about. One begins with a B and ends with an M. I'll let you figure out who that is. But
I have no idea who you're talking about, but go ahead.
People, exactly. Well, yeah, it's kind of tough. But to me, they're just spitting on the foundation of what these people did for us to be where we are now, especially after you listen to what Reggie Jackson went through.
Yeah, and I'll say one other thing to leverage what you just said. So around that time, Reggie Jackson was talking about in Birmingham, and he talked about what was going on in that city at that time. He mentioned the death of the 4 little girls in the basement of the Baptist church. And I mean, just thinking about that just about tears me up. That it was so awful. I mean, Birmingham was nicknamed Bombingham. That's how bad it was then. So 1968, that was certainly a turbulent time in our history. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The Vietnam War was raging on. More and more people spoke out and protested against it. And of course, during the Olympics, the famous picture of the 2 U.S. Track and field stars raising glove fist at the playing of the national anthem. But on the flip side of that, George Foreman, who won the gold medal, I think, in the heavyweight division for boxing, walking around the ring, waving his American flag, bowing to the audience. And considering what was going on at that point in time, for him to have the courage to do that was amazing. And believe me, he got a lot of pushback for doing that, because at that time, the black athletes were trying to organize to come up with some sort of protest against what was going on in the country at that time. And George Foreman decided, look, this country's not perfect. I love it. I'm an American. I am representing the United States of America in the Olympics. Why wouldn't I wave the American flag? I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be representing my country, and I'm happy that I won. So again, just a little peek into what was going on during that time in our history. And again, if blacks can stand up for the flag, salute the flag, be proud to be an American at that point in time, then why in the world can't you do that now, when you've got all the advantages and privileges anybody could want, especially these athletes that seem to forget how blessed they are to live in a country like ours. So I know we strayed a little bit off topic, but I think it all lines up as far as understanding what Willie Mays dealt with during most of his playing career. But beyond that, he was a beloved figure, not just by black people, but by all people. And he was able to overcome the scrutiny and the prejudice and the racism to be that type of figure that was beloved and is beloved by everybody, not just black people. So that's just an amazing achievement by him. And it speaks volumes to who he was as a man and as a human being.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good button to this. I would say that I don't know anybody who doesn't like Willie Mays.
I don't either. I don't recall anybody talking badly about Willie Mays. I really don't. Anybody that talks about him usually has a smile on their face or cheer in their voice. And I can't think of anybody that disliked him. There may be people, but I don't recall anybody speaking badly about him. I could be wrong. I know that he was banned from baseball, I think like in the late 70s. I think he was a greeter at a casino in Atlantic City. And I think the commissioner at that point, Bowie Kuhn, basically told him he could not have that relationship with the casino and be affiliated with the Mets. I think he was a coach or had some kind of role with the Mets at that time. And I think he gave up that role, but he was still banned from baseball for, I don't know if it was a year or 3 years. It wasn't long. I think by 85, I think when Peter Uberoth came in, I think he reinstated him. So he wasn't out for long, but I think as far as his long career, long life, if you want to point to a blemish, you might want to point to that, but I don't think his association with the casino was anything underhanded. He was just a greeter. I mean, yeah. And I know I talked about Joe Louis a little while ago. He was a greeter at one of the casinos in Vegas. I mean, because
he was broke. He had to make
that, and the casino knew everybody loved Joe Louis, and he would be a drawing card. So I'm sure that was the thinking for the particular casino in Atlantic City when they employed Willie to do the same thing. So just, I guess, to wrap it up from my end, Willie Mays, when I think about who he was as a player and as a man, it's like you can't help but smile when you think about the career he had and how many people he positively affected, how many people he made happy when they watched him play. And, again, I just wish I had the chance to see him play, but I was just a little bit too young by the time his career. And
go
ahead.
No, go ahead and finish your thought. When you were young and
Yeah.
you see him play.
And, again, when I started playing Little League and, later on Pony League and Colt League, certainly a player like Willie Mays, I think even at that point in the mid 70s, even after Willie Mays retired, Willie Mays had been retired for 3 years before I started playing baseball, but still, his legacy was still very prevalent throughout baseball. So as a little kid, it's like, well, wow, I want to be just like Hank Aaron, or wow, I want to be just like Willie Mays, or wow, I want to be just like Mickey Mantle. At that point in time, we weren't that far removed from those guys playing in the league. Of course, unfortunately today, you don't have nearly as many black kids wanting to play baseball, and it's a shame. It's a fantastic game, and it's just so much fun. I wasn't the greatest baseball player in the world. I got better as I got older, but I had so much fun playing baseball. And to watch those guys play on TV like Reggie Jackson, I like Reggie Jackson quite a bit when I was young. So to have guys like that to look up to and want to be like on the field, there's nothing like it. So I know Willie Mays inspired so many young kids to be just like him, not just black kids, all kids that played baseball. I mean, there's an iconic picture, and you've probably seen it, of Willie Mays playing stickball in the streets of New York City with a bunch of little kids. And I mean, that it's just icing on the cake as far as what we've been talking about what kind of player and what kind of guy Willie Mays was. And I know that Major League Baseball and sports in general are so much better off by having Willie Mays pass through and be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, baseball players of all time.
I mean, here you have him with Queen Elizabeth II and the President of the United States at the White House. I mean, I'm not sure it gets much better than that.
It does not.
In terms of, so, and I will say one thing. And Greg, thank you so much for wrapping that up and kind of putting a clip on that, because I think that's wrapped up nicely. But I will say something a little bit here. If you don't know much about Willie Mays in terms of him and his personality, go check out the Home Run Derby. They used to have these things back in the day where they would pit two all-stars together and do a home run derby head-to-head and see who can hit the most home runs in a given amount of time, whatever their rules were. But he goes up against none other than number 7, the New York Yankees, Mickey Mantle. And the interaction between those two in that home run derby is just gold. They're just so friendly, and they're enthusiastic about the sport, both of them. And I recommend you watch that. I think you get a good taste of what Mickey Mantle, what Willie Mays was like, but also Mickey Mantle too, not part of this topic, but a lot of people like Mickey Mantle too. He was very, very popular as well, especially with the young kids coming up.
You sure was.
Willie Mays, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So take a look at that video, and I think you'll get another take on Mr. Mays and his legacy and impact on the sport. And we're still talking about him to this very day. He died at 93 years old, and the outpouring of respect and admiration from his fans and fellow players has been nonstop. So as promised, let me tell you about this. As I recorded this, Greg and I, a few weeks passed, and then I saw an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the 5th season, episode 25. The title of the episode is In the Cards, and I will leave it right there. If you like Willie Mays, check it out. You don't have to be a Star Trek fan or even know anything about Star Trek to appreciate this particular episode. It just gives you an idea of how loved this man was. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions at all, please put those into an email at podcast@theconservativetake.com. That's podcast@theconservativetake.com. Greg and I will do an episode in the future. And with that, On behalf of myself and Greg, we will see you guys in the next one.